A century has passed since the Casham's defeat at Drassel, and the victors, the Ben Elam, now rule the banished lands, installing peace across the land. But it is the Ben Elam's version of peace. Their rule, established as a military dictatorship, is a peace born of fear and force. Tensions from their rule pull at the seams holding the banished lands together, and with the surviving Catasham lurking in the shadows, just the right pull would tear it all apart. This is the backdrop for John Gwynne's Of Blood and Bone trilogy, the direct successor to his previous series, the Fateful and the Fallen series. The 3 books in this series are A Time of Dread, A Time of Blood, and A Time of Courage. Before I get into the review, let me explain how I actually do reviews. Personally, I'm not a fan of a single rating for an entire series or book. Many books and series have strengths and weaknesses that a single score doesn't properly reflect. So for my reviews, I use a 5-star rating system, with the 5 being the highest, over 6 categories. And they are plot, world building, characters, magic system, writing, and enjoyment. But before I begin, these videos do take a lot of time to put together. So if you like the video, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Category 1. The plot. Of Blood and Bone is set once again in the Banished Lands, and takes place roughly a century after the events of the Fateful and the Fallen series. So we don't get to see the immediate aftermath of the war that concluded at the end of that series, but we do get a general summary. So basically, after the battle at the conclusion of the first series, we discover that not all the Catasham were defeated. For those who don't know, the Catasham are demonic creatures of the other world whose sole purpose is to resurrect their leader Azeroth and destroy the Ben Elam. The surviving Catasham takes to the shadows to plot the fall of the Ben Elam and the return of Azeroth in secret. But the Ben Elam knows of their existence, so they basically conscript the people of the banished lands into their armies with the sole purpose of eradicating all the Catasham. One of the few factions that resist their influence is the Order of the Bright Star, which was a faction created by Corbin. While their goal is the same as the Ben Elam, they do not agree with the Ben Elam's military dictatorship ways, so there is tension between the 2 factions. Like the previous series, this one is told through the point of view of several different characters. Those characters are Riv, a young trainee in the White Wings, which is the name of the foot soldiers of the Ben Elam; Drem, a trapper living out in the desolation with his father; Leda, a prince of one of the horse tribes who is held as hostage by the Ben Elam to ensure that there are no more wars among the horse tribes; Jin, a princess of another horse tribe that is rival to Bleda's and who is also being held as hostage by the Ben Elam; Sig, a giantess and member of the Order of the Bright Star; and Fritta, the high priestess of the Catasham. As for the general plot of each book, in the first book, A Time of Dread, we're introduced to the main characters through their point of views, learning what makes them tick, and we get caught up on what's going on in the Banished Lands after the events of the first series. Again, the Ben Elam ruled the land as military dictators and are hunting down the surviving Catasham. We see that the peace that the Ben Elam have enforced has created a lot of tension among the peoples of the Banished Lands, and it's heavily implied that this will help the Catasham rise up. Speaking of the Catasham, we also see what they're up to. Using their cultists, which are basically human Catasham sympathizers, they are raiding villages in the area known as the Desolation and are creating an army of Catasham human hybrids to combat the Ben Elam. All in all, the book pretty much sets the stage for what is to come. In Book 2, A Time of Blood, we pick up right where we left off with many of the characters in Book 1. Rem is on the run from the battle at the conclusion of Book 1. Without spoiling too much, he saw some world-altering things that he needs to inform the Order of the Bright Star about. Riv, on the other hand, is coming to grips with a massive world-breaking revelation about her very existence that alters her perspective of the Ben Elam negatively. Through Bleda, we get a look into the conflict of love and duty. And finally, we're introduced to a new POV character named Fritta. Aligned with the Catasham, through her, we get to see the inner workings of the quote-unquote bad guys. A big theme of this book is the concept of vengeance. Vengeance for betrayal, vengeance for defeat, vengeance for unresolved scores. It's introduced to us early on, and it builds throughout 3/4 of the book until it finally explodes in the final 1/4. Book 3, A Time of Courage, can best be summed up as an all-out battle. Yes, there are some lulls where battle strategies are discussed, but the book is all about epic battles that decide the fate of the Banished Lands. Like A Time of Blood, it picks up right after the events of the second book, where the characters and world must come to grips with the quote-unquote big arrival. The most prominent themes in this book are friendship and loyalty. A large part of this book is facing adversity with your friends besides you. It's a strong theme and is prevalent throughout much of the battles. The book ultimately concludes by wrapping up most of the storylines introduced across the trilogy. As for my rating, I'm going to come down really hard in this series. I'm going to give it 2 stars out of 5. My biggest issue with the series is that it's completely idiotic. Some of the actions of the characters make no sense and literally exist only to force the plot to develop in a very certain way. I'm going to explain one of those things right now, which is a massive spoiler. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then skip ahead to category 2, world building. Alright, Drem's father. In the events of book 1, him and Drem finds a large piece of starstone in Starstone Lake. For those of you who don't remember, starstone is the material that was used to create the great treasures, whose main function ended up being to open the gateway to free Azeroth. Drem Fathers takes the starstone and instead of trying to hide it, he makes a sword out of it. He makes an actual treasure. Again, the treasures were the only thing that can open a gate to the other world, and they were all destroyed at the end of the first series. So with none in the world, why in the hell would you make a new one and reintroduce such a threat? It makes no damned sense. And don't even get me started on how a human was even able to make it. It was explained in the first series that the giants made them since they were the master smiths. Drem's father, a trapper and not a master smith, just happened to have the ability to make a sword out of starstone? What? Give me a break. Now let's talk about Fritham. She's explained to us as a roughly 20-year-old. Yet this very young girl is a master at genetic splicing and can literally combine different creatures to create hybrids. Again, what? And how does she even do it? Well, you're not really even told, even though she's a POV character. A lot of what happens in this book literally feels like the author wanted certain events to happen and he had to engineer a way to make it happen. And I'm not a fan of it. Category 2, world building. The world building here is fine. I like that the author set the story a century or so after the first series, and instead of showing the angelic Ben Elam as benevolent saviors, he depicted them as dictators, which lends some realism to the tensions present in the Banished Lands. It feels good, so I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Category 3, the characters. I'm going to start this off and just tell you my rating, since I can't really talk about this section without spoiling a lot of things. So 1 star out of 5. Outside of Drem, I dislike all of the characters. So if you don't want to be spoiled right now, you should skip to category 4, the magic system. For those of you still here, let's start with Riv. Or should I say, the amazing Super Riv, who can whip everyone's ass despite her being 20-something years old. This character is the very definition of a Mary Sue. She's the best soldier in her training unit. She's the best fighter in general, as she can go up to veterans and whip their asses. She can immediately master the use of her wings and whip the asses of the Ben Elam and the Kadoshim, even though they've had thousands of years of experience using their wings. And everyone loves and respects her upon meeting her. She's just super great. And here's the thing. How and why? How can anyone like and respect such a hot-headed character? Think about it, dear viewer. Think about your own circle of friends. Are any of your super close friends hot-headed loudmouths? Chances are that they're not, because no one can stand such an attitude for a prolonged period of time. And what annoys me the most about this character is that she's introduced as a hothead, and it costs her early on when she fails her warrior's trial. So you would think that she would work on this trait in order to get better and improve. But does she? Hell no. The amazing Super Riv is perfect as she is. She's literally the reason why I'm giving this 1 star out of 5. And the other characters aren't great either. Bleda has his issues. He had potential with being a hostage of the Ben Elam, but he's utterly ruined with the author's decisions. To force a peace between the 2 rival horse clans, he and Jin are supposed to be married. However, as he's in love with Riv because she gave him his brother's bow, yeah, he's in love with her because she gave him a bow. He doesn't want to marry Jin anymore. What the author could have done is make him choose between duty and love and marry Jin despite his love for Riv. This would have been way more interesting. Instead, the author just makes Jin and her tribe evil so that Blood doesn't have to make a tough decision. It's wasted potential. Further, makes no sense to me as a character because it's not believable at all that she's a master genetic splicer. Drem is actually the only character I like. He's not a warrior, and it shows since he's the only character that's not able to cut down all of his enemies like they're wheat. He's also introduced us as a shy and reserved character, and he stays true to this, but you can see him slowly break out of his shell throughout the course of the books. He actually feels like a character that developed realistically, so I actually like him. Still, a majority of the characters can best be described as either wasted potential or head scratching. So again, 1 star out of 5. Category 4, the magic system. The problem that plagued the first series still plagues this one. The magic system in the very first book of the original series was described to be centered around the idea of belief. The challenger needed to believe a thing in order to make it really happen. This series, much like the first one, dumbed it down to the point where it's just say magic word and use blood as a fuel and magic happens. It's not elegant and it feels lazy. Because of that, I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. Category 5, the writing. John Gwynne's prose is an improvement I feel over the first series. I don't recall any grammatical errors this time around, and he's gotten away from using the same adjective multiple times in a sentence to describe something. It feels a lot better. But he still has issues with his flow and word choice. I lost count of how many times a character plowed into another character, or how characters go from being hacked in the sides, having their armor stop the attack, to sprinting forward all within the same sentence. Doesn't feel particularly great, but overall I'll still give it 3 stars out of 5. Category 6, enjoyment. Considering my issues with the plot and the characters, I did not enjoy this series very much. It has its moments, especially the battles, but when you start skimming certain POVs, I'm looking at you, Riv. You're not enjoying yourself very much. Because of that, I'm gonna have to give it 1 star out of 5. So that's my review of the Blood and Bone trilogy. I hope it helps you decide whether it's a series you want to invest your time in or not. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one.